guess we'll get this meeting underway here. So thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I'm the presiding chair. Councillors Rayner and Councillor Cody send their regrets. Unfortunately, they will not be here tonight, but everyone else is. I will mention right now, if you haven't done so already, if you would like to have a follow-up regarding future meetings, anything that's discussed here, if you can sign in the attendance sheet, that's a good way to just kind of staying in touch with everything else that's going on and gives a chance for staff to kind of reach out to you guys afterwards. Also mention that there's no need for any video or audio recording, so if you could please turn your cell phones, your pagers, your PDAs, anything electronic, if you turn that off, that'd be appreciated. Everything is being video and audio recorded, and that should be up within, I don't know, a few days or so should you want to go back and review something. Going through things here, I'll look around. Do we have any change in order of items on the agenda? Not seeing any. That's good. So do we have any disclosure of pecuniary conflict of interest and or conflict of interest by anybody? Not seeing any there. So then we're going to move forward to appointments. Our first appointment, item A01-20, is presented by Matt Robinson and Robin Saleh. Did I get that right? Perfect. And from the Niagara region there, transit services, Niagara region fixed transit program, and optional on-demand transit option. So gentlemen, please step forward there, and I guess just have a right in front of the mic there. Unfortunately, we don't have a podium, so if you can, both are going to speak, you can alternate, but you can stand right next to them. Excellent. So this is, if you could just, when you come up, just for the public, introduce your names there, and then that way they know who's who.
Great, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff and committee for the opportunity to be here. My name is Matt Robinson. I am the Director of GO Implementation at Niagara Region, and Mr. Saleh and I are going to provide an update to committee on where what we refer to as Intermunicipal Transit, or IMT West, which is an on-demand deployment of transit, is going for the future. We had a very good conversation with the CAO and her team, and they felt that that was a worthwhile update to this committee, and we're happy to be here to provide that update. I think having said that, we're happy to answer any questions that committee may have at the end of the presentation. Mr. Saleh will talk a bit about sort of the opportunity, where we sit with regional council and the deployment, subsequently the opportunity for local area municipalities to buy into the program and what that opportunity really looks like, the cost and the service plan to do so, and subsequently what the region is delivering in its deployment of the on-demand transit program as well. So without further ado, I know there is a heavy agenda tonight. I will pass things over to my colleague, Mr. Saleh, and let him walk committee through the program.
Evening, everyone. Again, my name is Rob Saleh. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. As Matt mentioned, I am the program manager for transit services at Niagara Region, and let's just get started. So a quick agenda for my presentation. I'll give you a bit of a background. I'll talk a little bit about the community empowerment that transit provides, a discussion regarding fixed route transit versus on-demand and how we landed on that model. Why VIA, so the company that we're looking at deploying with is called VIA Mobility, and we'll talk a little bit about why we ended up with them as our provider. Some specifics for the IMT West expansion, and any decision point, both current and future, for West Lincoln, as well as some next steps. So a quick background. In 2018, there was a service implementation. Thank you. Which identified pilot projects for Niagara West, as well as connections for both Pelham and Lincoln. There were some municipal partnerships that we've already attained this year. We did presentations in both Pelham and Lincoln to partner with us for the on-demand service, and in both of those cases, those municipalities have decided to wind down their existing fixed route services and replace them by joining with us in this partnership for on-demand. And we're currently just awaiting Grimsby's budget approval. Their budget committee meets next week, and so we'll be waiting to find out whether or not they're participating in the sort of optional portion that I'll discuss a little bit later on. And lastly, just a bit of a precursor, a little bit separate from my presentation, but still pertinent, is the Niagara Transit Governance Study, which is ongoing at Niagara Region right now. We expect the report following the recommendation for the governance model to come out of that report sometime around April, maybe even May, just depending on how things go with that study. So that'll discuss the alignment of transit in Niagara and whether or not it should continue operating with a number of different municipalities, each operating their own individual transit services, or whether or not there should be some form of consolidation to reduce that to a single entity. So for community empowerment, why is transit important? First and foremost, it's about the freedom to travel and equitable access for residents. Roughly 30% of all Canadians do not have access to a vehicle. And so there's a significant portion of a community that does need to have access to everything, including jobs, healthcare, education, event services, local businesses. But as well, it really just fosters a sense of inclusivity when people have an opportunity to get there regardless of their socioeconomic status. So the billboards there on the right were just a bit of a communications piece that Region had done in the fall, just trying to highlight some of the opportunities that come by providing transit. Fixed route versus on-demand. So fixed route transit's what I'm sure most of everyone here is familiar with. That's where you run a set schedule along a fixed route. And that's the traditional model for transit. Unfortunately, it's seen a significant decline in the last 10, 15 years or so. And that's really that there's a lot of limited benefits to that. And this slide's really meant to provide a comparison between fixed route and on-demand, where on-demand uses technology to route directly to where people need those trips. So, whether it's right to the property or right to the healthcare facility, provides a much more direct routing opportunity. So just in comparison from left to right there, the limited coverage area, it's very difficult with a fixed route service to cover each of your residents in a municipality. It takes a significant number of vehicles with a significant frequency in order to provide them any decent level of service, whereas on demand you automatically are covering the entirety of your municipality because, again, those trip requests are dictating where the vehicles go to pick them up. A fixed route relies on peak demand to maximize the vehicle utilization. That's really just saying the same as with your road network. It's busy in the morning and in the afternoon, and then those vehicles tend to be empty later, in the midday or in the evening, just like the road. With on-demand, however, we're able to respond to that real-time demand, and it helps to stabilize that curve of trips because you can cover a wider area, as mentioned in the first point. With fixed route, you do have an approximate 4-month lead time when you're trying to make a schedule change, whereas, again, with on-demand, everything is adjusted dynamically, so there's really no need. As soon as something can be pushed out to an app with a notification is as quickly as a change can be made. And again, with fixed route, the data is limited. Yes, you do get a fair number of data points as far as where people get on vehicles, but you don't get that same offloading. So you don't get the origin destination information, and you really don't get to see where people are going in your community. However, with on-demand, the very nature of booking that trip, both its origin and destination are included, as well as a unique rider profile. So you get a sense of the age and other demographic factors of those riders, which really does help break down who in the community needs what type of services. So there's a great opportunity there for that data to be utilized in a number of different ways going forward. For the providers themselves, a lot of the benefits are the same in the sense that it maximizes the coverage area. We don't have to send, hundreds of buses across large municipalities, especially when they're rural. It can be extremely difficult to cover everyone. Cost containment. So there may be some familiarity with some of the people present that Innisfil had launched a pilot project with Uber, and it was very exciting because they were able to cover each of their municipalities. The challenge, though, is they're essentially just subsidizing that Uber trip. And so the more successful that service gets, the higher the cost goes. And just a little bit of context, they budgeted, I think, 125 for that first year. It might have even been 100. They spent 125. Year 2, they budgeted 150. They came back in March asking for another 250, and they still went over budget. and now roughly their third year, they're at $900,000 for their budget for that service. And, on one hand, it's great that the service is taking off. It clearly shows that there's a need in the community for additional alternative opportunities for transportation. But the model itself of the way that they're just subsidizing those per trip costs shows it to be unsustainable, and you really become a victim of your own success. Whereas what we're looking at is different. We're paying an hourly rate, and so it's all about utilizing the maximum number of trips available within that time frame. So there's an increased ridership potential over any sort of fixed route, which again stems from the coverage area increase. There's a number of flexible operating models. So you can go right door to door, you can go curb to curb, and you can also do corner to corner, which is what our service provider specializes in. And this basically is asking residents to participate a little more. It's not just coming door to door. It's, walking 100 to 200 meters out to the nearest main intersection where somebody can be picked up. And I will, put a bit of a caveat on that, is it is safely. So on a road where there's no sidewalks, it's door to door instead. So any sort of rural road, that's typically going to be the case. If the person's unique rider profile indicates that they're in a wheelchair or, use a walker or something of that nature, they're going to get door-to-door service as well. So, we're not endangering anybody for the sake of efficiency, but for the bulk of the riders, there's an opportunity to try and ease some of the burden on the service by walking that 100 to 200 meters. This runs into the next point in that if you have an effective on-demand service, you can eliminate the need for a separate specialized transit service. So the region currently operates quite a costly specialized transit service that is only for those who are not able to use the available conventional or fixed route public service. Should this pilot be as effective as we're hoping it would be, we'll be looking at opportunities to merge those two together. And that way there's no need for anybody to pre-register or go to their doctor's office or pay any sort of fee in order to get that paperwork filled out. There's just one public transit service that's available for residents to use. Regardless of your needs or your levels of accommodation, you can use that service, and that personal app or the unique rider profile will ensure that you can get the accommodation that you need. On-demand might be new to Niagara, new to Ontario, frankly, but it's not new in the world. There are hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of deployments of different types of models. So it can be quite flexible, as I mentioned earlier. And I know I touched on it already, but big data is key. It's a bit of a buzzword, but this type of service provides opportunities that just doesn't exist under the fixed route services. For the riders, of course, they get their own set of benefits. Their unique rider profile, as I mentioned, ensures that their specific needs are being accommodated for. The vehicles are accessible, so just like our fixed route service and just like our specialized transit service, we can accommodate riders in wheelchairs or maybe in walkers or any sort of additional accommodations that they require. There are multiple options for booking. So yes, it's software driven, and so the same as Uber, you want to enable people to book trips through an app, but we also recognize that not everybody has a smartphone, and that this service is being set up in a way that you can still call in and book that request the same way. So there's a lot of opportunities regardless of what you need. Improve connectivity by not relying on fixed routes and being able to travel directly to your destination. That really does provide connections throughout your municipality. Well, again, whether that's to local businesses or community events, there's that opportunity there for people. In addition, the pricing is consistent. So again, I'll use the Uber model. If anyone's ever used an Uber during rush hour, they have a little item called surge pricing, and you don't really ever know what your pricing is going to be. The model that we're bringing forward has a fixed price. It really has two fixed prices. One for a local trip would be $3, and an intermunicipal trip, so where you're crossing into a different municipality, would be $6. And that even includes a transfer onto the existing fixed route services, as I'll touch on later, in St. Catharines, Welland, and Port Colborne. And of course, real-time vehicle information, because it's app-driven, because it's software-driven, those vehicles have real-time information. And so unlike with our specialized transit service where we have a half-hour service window where you can be picked up somewhere within that half hour, this service will give you a much more accurate time for being picked up. And it eliminates a lot of the waiting, and which is one of the grievances that we hear most often with our specialized transit service. So it seeks to improve that as well. So why Via Mobility? Via really, it came down to the fact that they were the only company that we could provide or found that could provide everything that we were looking for. Since OnDemand is new in Niagara, we were hesitant about jumping in with a capital acquisition right off the start and procuring those vehicles for ourselves. There are a number of companies that just offer software. In fact, that technology space is very busy, and we interviewed a number of companies along that front, and which really encompasses the microtransit platform, which is in the top right corner. Whereas Via was different because they also provide the microtransit operations, which is the task in the bottom left corner there. And that really means that they provide the vehicles, they provide the drivers, they provide the customer service facilities as well. And this is, I liken it to the same way that Tesla has recognized that in order to break into a gasoline environment, they need to provide their own charging network. This is really the same thing, as they recognize that municipalities are going to be hesitant about jumping in with their own fleets for something that they feel is unproven, even if it's been proven elsewhere. And so they've recognized that by covering this gap in the short term, municipalities can then test whether or not they feel that it works, and then they can determine whether or not they want to bring some or all of those services in-house by acquiring vehicles, hiring staff and drivers, or whether they want to continue with a turnkey operation. So again, Via was the only company that we found in our extensive search and as part of the Intermunicipal Transit Working Group search that can do sort of the whole breadth of everything. And so this is really how we landed on them. An interesting note as well about Via, when we talked to the other software-based companies, they all considered Via to be their prime target or their prime competition. So you're doing something right when all of the competitors are all referring to the same company as saying who their number one competitor was. So it's a bit of an anecdotal piece, but we still took notice of that. This slide's a little out of date now. Via's just under 100 deployments worldwide. They do over $2 million or 2 million rides per month. The different colors really just highlight the different types of deployments they have. It just means that in some cases they act like an Uber, in some cases they're partnered with the municipality, and sometimes they just lease their software. So it just really shows that they have a breadth of mobility or service options that the municipality can choose, whatever one fits their model the best. Which brings us specifically to IMT West. And this is really to highlight connectivity to a number of different opportunities, including the existing transit network, as you can see highlighted by the 3 bullets there in St. Catharines, Welland, and Port Colborne. The GO and future GO transit stations that we'll be having in Grimsby and hopefully one in Beamsville. And of course, to the other Niagara municipalities, which is something that is unfortunately not being completed at this time. There is no transit opportunities in West Niagara. And so we wanted to seek to rectify that from a regional perspective. However, we also want to ensure that it's a seamless experience from the rider's perspective. So the same way that I mentioned earlier about the governance review, and depending on what municipality you're in, depends on whose transit service you're using, and that means you might need a different fare ticket, which also might mean you're paying a different price for that ride, and sometimes trying to keep track of that is challenging. So by covering the entire area with one service, it really does streamline that opportunity from the rider experience perspective. In addition, it also provides the opportunity for both local trips as well as intermunicipal trips, and that's something that I'll touch on a little bit more. The region's sort of base level of service is that we have jurisdiction to provide intermunicipal transit trips only, so trips between municipalities, but there is an optional buy-in opportunity should municipalities willing to partner, where they can also get access to trips within their own municipality as well. So it is an optional piece that I'll touch on again just a bit further. The pilot was approved by regional council. It's scalable, so again, both the joint and the intermunicipal portions of that, and we're currently looking at a deployment of the end of first quarter, the beginning of Q2 for deployment. We're hoping for April. As of right now, there's a number of tasks that need to be ironed out before then, so we're optimistic, but that's still our target. So, why are we considering this a pilot? This isn't a pilot in the sense of testing transit in West Niagara. The region is committed to providing connectivity for West Niagara residents. The pilot is specifically with VIA. So yes, they provide this platform, they provide these vehicles, and they provide these drivers, but that doesn't mean that we're willing to jump into a long-term contract with a company just based on what they're telling us they can provide and what they've provided elsewhere. So we're looking at roughly a 1-year pilot with an option to extend another 12 months to ensure that what we're being promised and what we hear about through the review of the other municipalities actually works in a Niagara context. And frankly, the Niagara context is quite different. It's, as you all know, very large geographically, relatively small populations, which means small density. So it's a bit of a pilot, almost as much for VIA in that sense as well. So when we looked at our feasibility study, we also looked at an opportunity where what if West Lincoln just wanted to do its own local-based on-demand service? That would take roughly 3 to 4 vehicles. An intermunicipal service takes 7 to 10 vehicles, and if we were to combine those services together, because of the efficiencies that we gain in routing, it just takes the same 7 to 10 vehicles. So there really is an opportunity to, pick people up along the way and reduce some of the wasted or what we call deadheading time between that. As a matter of context, one vehicle at 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, costs approximately $250,000. So if West Lincoln was looking to do something on its own entirely, you're somewhere in the $750,000 to $1 million range, which is pretty costly. But again, it's right in line with what you're sort of hearing about the Innisfil Uber model, and there's no real surprise that they're getting up to that model. Transit costs what transit costs, and unfortunately it's expensive in order to help people provide an additional opportunity for transportation options. So where do we stand right now as far as the local on-demand option? I touched on it earlier. Both Pelham and Lincoln have agreed that it's in their best interests to cease the operations of their fixed route services. That was not something that the region, recommended or promoted to them. We simply brought a very similar presentation to them, and they recognize that those existing transit dollars that they have in their budget are better allocated to a joint project where you're providing that much better coverage area and at a significantly higher level of service than they currently operate those fixed route services. We went out to Grimsby as well. So they did at that time pass a motion to refer that to their budget committee, which again is next week. So should they also choose to join in, those 3 municipalities would have access to the intermunicipal transit service, which is again the region's base level of service that we'll be providing. But in addition, because of their financial contribution, they will also have access to trips within their own municipality. And really for them, it came down, Grimsby, I'll just use them as an example why we think there's a strong case there is, if a resident was in Grimsby and wanted to go to the GO station on Casablanca, we wouldn't be able to deliver that service unless they were partnering with us. They would have to go outside of their municipality in order to get to the GO station. So they really saw that, while there's benefits to sometimes leaving, there's a lot of benefits to meeting, getting out to those local businesses, or in this case, to a GO station. So where West Lincoln has that same opportunity, we want to make sure that we put that out to each of the municipalities. We did to Wainfleet as well. It's that we're essentially, that opportunity is $250,000, which is still a significant amount of money, we understand, but it's far less than the 3 to 4 vehicles that if you were to run any sort of on-demand service on your own. And based on what both Pelham and Lincoln have found is that just paying for that one vehicle to drive around their municipality in a circle really doesn't give the return on trips that they would expect. yes, it provides some connectivity, but no, it's not enough. And each of those municipalities have been looking at ways to increase their service, which of course comes at a commensurate increase in cost. So by getting that sort of one vehicle buy-in, they'll be getting access to a fleet of 7 to 10 vehicles, just depending on where the region's final service lands. So there's in that respect, a very little cost compared to the benefit, even though the cost is significant from the onset. So again, just for the decision for West Lincoln, both current and in the future, you have sort of an opt-in and an opt-out scenario. The opt-in, as I mentioned, is both trips between municipalities and within your own municipality, so local and intermunicipal trips. The opt-out option is you just let the region do what the region was already going to do, and your residents will be able to travel, as an example, from West Lincoln to Grimsby or to Pelham or to the Port Colborne City Hall in order to catch another bus. So there will be an opportunity in Welland as well. I didn't mean to single out Port Colborne, but just for the sense that they can connect to the existing transit network in other cases. And that's really what those three major points were that were on the earlier map. So just to highlight quickly the peer investments in transit, I know I touched on transit being expensive. Looking at the 2018 expenditures there, you can see that Fort Erie is paying close to $1 million. That was even higher with the region recently uploading their link route, and they're only getting roughly 37,000 trips. A little more closely aligned to West Lincoln would be the Pelham and Lincoln situations where they're paying in the $200,000 to $300,000 range, but their trip numbers are quite low, to be quite frank. And when you start doing some of the calculations, they're paying somewhere in the $50 to $100 per trip. When you start to break it down by rider, it becomes a lot tougher to justify in that perspective, which is why they saw the value of joining in on this, because the opportunity for growth of ridership is significant in that. And so we've been able to stabilize their investment in transit for the 2020 period for a one-year pilot. Now, there are some still additional considerations. We're still working on some of the details of the service parameters. So the number of hours per day, the number of partners that we're able to have. We're currently looking at 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That aligns with Niagara Region Transit's existing hours, so we thought it's a great place to start. The number of vehicles that we need, we believe the fares, this slide's maybe a little bit outdated as we've all but landed on a $3 local fare and a $6 intermunicipal fare. That makes it a lot easier to connect to the existing service without having to do a lot of back-end rules. I mentioned the one-year pilot with a option to extend for 12 months. This is really great as far as the governance review is concerned. We're not 100% sure what the time frame is going to be coming out of that review, and we wanted to make sure that if there is a new consolidated entity, that it's not being hamstrung by a long contract, but at the same time that it has the option to maintain continuity of services. And so if they do take over, they have the opportunity to do so. And again, to reiterate, we're looking at an April 2020 deployment. So really at nearing the end here, the next steps, we're just looking to confirm those local partnerships. So we already have Pelham and Lincoln. We're waiting to hear back from Grimsby. West Lincoln, of course, has the opportunity to partner should it wish this year, and certainly that opportunity would extend in future years as we appreciate that there's a significant ask that comes along with that. And we certainly aren't looking to pressure anybody, but just making sure that those opportunities are extended for partnership. And then beyond that, it all starts about the implementation. And we are planning a significant community engagement program with our service provider. So, it'll range the whole gamut from radio, newspaper, coming out to the municipalities, in places where existing transit exists, we'll be out on the buses, trying to get people used to getting them to download the app, making sure they get their user profile and their payment methods set up, and just trying to make it as streamlined of a process as possible. So, it's not, oh, I hear there's a service. It's, oh, I'm familiar with that service that's starting, and I'll be more inclined to try that. And then from there on, it's about continuous optimization, which was one of the highlights of having an on-demand service is we don't have a long period of time before making changes. We can simply go forward and make those changes. I know that was a lot to digest, and I apologize. I know I tend to speak quickly on that. It's, having given that presentation maybe a couple of times by now, it tends to come out rather quickly. So I apologize if anything was done hastily, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Saleh. I'll go look at committee. Do we have any questions here? Councillor Ganam.
Okay, just a comment. I have been involved with our Age-Friendly Advisory Committee, and there are some members here that I invited actually to come and hear you speak. I'm assuming that we still plan to invite whoever can come to speak at our committee meeting as well. We have discussed the Innisfil situation as well, but there were no further details that we could find. So I think I would just like to pass on to you how much our committee would appreciate knowing exactly what that is costing. It's one thing to hear that somebody's using a service. It's another thing to know what it's actually costing residents and the municipality. So I do appreciate that piece of information. Thank you.
And through your chair, just to comment to that, we will certainly, I'll be attending the Age-Friendly Committee. We appreciate the opportunity to speak. We'll speak both about the Niagara Specialized Transit Service that exists currently, as well as this IMT West service that we're looking at. So we'll try and provide as much information as possible, and I'll make a note to discuss a little bit about the Innisfil Uber model as well, so there's some details available.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, as well. The other thing that I should point out to the rest of the committee is that each time we've held any kind of a gathering of residents, mainly older residents, the whole notion of the lack of transportation and not even having a taxi service readily available here is always a keen issue that's brought up by everybody. So I know that there was some discussion, and I see one of our co-chairs has just arrived. There was a question mark about whether we would still need to have you come after tonight's presentation, but yes, we do. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Not seeing any. Oh, sorry, Madam CEO.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Saleh. I was thinking about the comment I wanted to make. The one thing, because I've heard the presentation a couple times now, maybe what would be useful would be to talk about the vehicle, because I think the fact that it's not a bus and it's a sort of a smaller 7-seat or 8-seat van would be informative.
Through you, Chair. Absolutely. So that's an example up on the screen there of essentially the types of vehicles that would be getting there. Mercedes Metris 7-passenger vans. The reason why they're Mercedes is that VIA comes with a partnership with Mercedes already. So they essentially get preferred pricing in order to do that, and really just sort of lends an air of credibility to it. So we did discuss with them opportunities for other types of vehicles as well, and there really isn't a premium on pricing because of that preferred that they get. So the vehicles will be accessible. So there will be able to accommodate a wheelchair. It does cut into the 7 when that's happening, but this service really does prioritize the shared ride portion of the service. So anyone using this should expect that there will be another passenger in that, as that's how it attempts to route from one trip to another. And it even tries to align times as well. So, if you were going to leave at, say, 10, and I was going to leave at 10:30, it might push you out to, say, 10:10 and push me out to 10, or push me back to 10:20, so that I can do 2 of us in one vehicle, as opposed to sending one vehicle out now and then another one out half an hour from now. So there's still plenty of room. There's still vans. It's not, we're not tucking everyone into a sedan, but they're not the larger, certainly not the large 40-foot vans that we use on our regional service, not even the ones that you may have seen around Port Colborne or in Lincoln, where they're sort of the airport shuttle type vehicles. These are much more sort of passenger style vans like we run with our specialized transit service.
Actually, if I could just ask you, is this, maybe I missed it, but what are the hours of operation? Is it 20, did it actually say in there? Did I miss that?
Yeah,
what
absolutely. So we're
7 to 10?
We're looking at 7 to 10 right now. That aligns with our existing regional service, so we're pretty confident that that's where we'll end up.
And that I'm guessing that's what's being applied elsewhere, or that's, but you said before with there being other, I guess, communities that have adapted it, that seems to be like a suitable time. Like I'm just thinking like 7 to 10, like, I don't know, I'm just trying to get an understanding of how accessible that can be for some folks.
So I would say that everything's limited by budget. So in a scenario with unlimited budget, we would like to provide some service hours later into the evening, especially on the weekends, to try and provide people a safe ride home. It might be something that we can still examine, maybe depending on Grimsby's involvement, as there would be a financial contribution, but 7 to 10 is what we typically find works for the most part for the bulk of our riders on our fixed route service. And so we figured that was a safe place to start as far as a pilot project with West Niagara.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much for your time there, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so moving forward, we have item A02-20, and from what I understand, just before the end of the day there, Brenda Vick-Vance has withdrawn her, I guess, appointment to speak. She's going to schedule another time with us. Something's come up. So we're going to move down to consent items. And so the recommendation that Administration, Finance, and Fire Committee hereby approve the following consent items. Items 1, 2, and 3B and are hereby received for information, and items 4 and 5B and are hereby received for the recommendations contained therein be adopted, with the exceptions of any items to be announced sooner or later, if any. 1, West Lincoln Age Friendly Advisory Committee minutes of November 1st, 2019. 2, Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes of November 14, 2019. 3, the information report WLFD-02-20 monthly update December 2019. 4, recommendation report WLFD-01-20 updating West Lincoln Township Health and Safety Policy Bylaw. And 5, recommendation report RFD-C-01-2020-2020, I guess it's 2020 summer and December minutes, their meeting schedule. Do we have any items to be pulled? Oh, you're just moving? All right, so I guess I need a mover.
No,
So-
you need to pull 5, please.
You want to pull 5? Do I? Okay. So I guess. So I didn't get that part. So I got Mayor Billsma moved, Councilor Chabetta seconded, and so we're pulling 5. Anything else that we want to pull? Seeing none, all those, I guess with the exception of 5, all those in favor? Okay, that carries. All right, so we pulled 5. So the recommendation report RFD-C-01-2020, 2020 summer and December meeting schedule. Councilor Ganam, would you like to speak to
Yes,
that?
thank you. I'd just like to ask probably our clerk, through you, Mr. Chair, if the proposed summer dates are etched in stone. I have a problem, as I have in the past, with that 3rd week of July. So if they're not set for solid reasons, I would like to request that we move it back a week, as we did last summer. And if they are etched in stone, then my next question is, can we, although the recommendation report states that it there's been some consultation with staff, I would like to request in the future that there also be perhaps some consultation with members of council, as we are also affected by those dates. So,
All right.
well, I do. That's a problem. Once a year.
So, hold on, I'm just trying to pick it up here, sorry. Did you have something to say? Okay, so I guess before we consider moving that back, because I do believe there's a possibility that week before might interfere with at least 1 or 2 of our schedules for those who may be attending the AMO conference. I believe that might be happening the week
Isn't it in
before.
August?
Which date, sorry, maybe I missed.
July. The
July.
The July meeting is the one
My
that's of concern to
apologies.
me, yeah.
My wires across there. Okay, so, how do we go about, I guess, moving that back?
We can make an amendment to the report to move that July meeting date to the week prior to. Unfortunately, just so you know that some members of staff may be unable to attend that meeting, but we will do our best.
So that, I guess that's my concern, is that, so that when members of staff have some issues with that particular date, so do sometimes members of council, in this case me, because always the third week of July, we have had, for many years, over 20, that's our 1 year a week, our 1 week a year, sorry, that we definitely know that we aren't available. So if it can be changed, I'd appreciate it. If it can't be changed, I just want to know that going forward, we have some part in the discussion.
Okay, Councilor Trebetta.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand, Councilor Gananda, that you're coming from. I know it's just 1 week, but to move 7 people or 6 people back for 1 week, I haven't looked at my schedule. I'm quite sure my vacation schedule, if my week comes up the week before, I say we keep it, and if there's more people that we can't have a quorum, we can maybe move it, but I don't see an issue of making it, and not that I don't want to make it a one exception for yourself, but it's one meeting. It's in the summertime, right? I just think that if we're going to move a meeting then we're going to have another councillor saying, well, let's move all January's meetings because he's on vacation as well. And I just don't want to set that precedence.
Well, but the summer schedule comes to us for approval. And that's the difference. So I just, my point is essentially, if it can't be changed, so be it. If it can be changed, as it was last year, and it was only the second week of July last year, then let's change it now while we have this opportunity. And if that can't be done, then going forward, I think before it comes to a report stage, we should have some input into that.
So if I could, I think this might be a situation where maybe we could leave that with staff, refer that back to staff, and maybe they can have a discussion, and then we can have that
Yes,
come back.
Mr. Chair, I'd rather it go back to staff because, you know what, we don't have all members of council here, and maybe, with all the members of council, maybe we can all just collaborate together and decide if we can move that together, I think. I think it's unjust if we just, without them knowing, well, 2 of them are out of the country, maybe they have something else. So I think we should do it at a later date.
Okay, so Madam CEO?
Thank you. We were hemming and hawing about whether we should be bringing this forward this early, and I'm glad we did. So, staff had a meeting right after the new year and started to talk about it. And so, if there is an opportunity or request for us to relook at it, we now have a bit of time to do that. So, we'd be fine with it coming back to us.
Okay.
So I would just need a referral motion to refer that back to staff, and we will, what more than likely I'll do is to set out a survey to see between staff and council, senior staff and council, as to their availability, and I would suggest that perhaps we would go with majority.
And just to be clear, are we going to just
problem with that.
have some consistency? Will we just do all the dates, so you can we're not coming back and finding out a month later, now no one can do August or no one can do December? Can we just have that conversation collectively?
The schedule's already been released through Barb, if I'm not correct. She sent the whole, did she not send the whole schedule out?
No.
So I didn't go that far.
Those would have been TBDs, I think.
Okay.
I think as far as that one that we get at the beginning of the year.
One of the other reasonings for those dates, I think last year we had some, we kind of made them more, spread out. I think they were very quick. The first one last year was very quick after we finished June. So I made it so it was 1 week later, only because we weren't dealing with the end of June council, and then 2 weeks later we were dealing with a council again, and then the August is always delayed because of the AMO conference, so then there was almost close to more 5-6 weeks between those two. So I was just trying to make them even, and that was my thoughts behind choosing the dates that I did.
Okay, so I think we're good to refer this back to staff. I got Councilor Trombetta moved it. I think I had Councilor Jonker seconded it. So I guess at this point, all those in favor of referring this back to staff? Okay, that carries. Okay, so moving forward, we have communications. Item number A04-20, and I'm going to butcher his last name, Honorable John Yurkabusky, Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, re-meeting with Parliamentary Assistant regarding Niagara Escarpment Crossing, and this is received for information only. I don't know who I'm really going with to speak to this. So is that you? No. It's just for... Received for information. Okay. I thought we had someone that would say something about it, so, all right, so we can move forward, no one wants to speak to that. All right, staff reports, item A05-20, Treasurer and Director of Finance, Donna Philippi. Information report, number RFD-T-01-2020, draft operating and capital budget, preliminary report, and there's gonna be a PowerPoint presentation presented by Donna.
Thank you, Chairman Riley. So, Council, this is our first look at the 2020 draft operating and capital budget. Just to remind you of the future dates relating to budget, on February 18th, we will be presenting the report for final approval. And if necessary, we also have February 19th set aside. An open house to discuss the budget is scheduled for Wednesday, February 5th at 7 p.m. There's been a change in location for that. That's going to be held in the library program room at the West Lincoln Community Center. The final budget that will be presented in February will not vary significantly from this document unless staff are given direction from council to make revisions. Before I start the presentation, I want to thank the CAO and senior management for their commitment and support in ensuring that this budget could be presented to council in a timely manner. We're more than a month earlier than last year. So the agenda for this evening, the operating budget will be covered. There'll be a discussion of the service level change requests. Capital budget will be covered, and then the 10-year capital plans, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. So the budgeted expenditures and revenue that are in the report result in an overall tax levy increase of $577,530. This represents an 8.32% levy increase. After factoring in assessment growth, which is estimated at 1.86%, we end up with a levy increase of 6.48%. When that's translated to the impact on property taxes, it results in a $74 increase to property taxes, or a 5.88%. Council should also note the average assessment for single detached home. This is a figure we always use when trying to estimate the impact to an average homeowner, has increased to $382,397 from $363,877. Now, as a lower tier municipality, the township's tax bill actually collects for three entities: the township, the upper tier region, and school boards. The township's portion of the entire bill is approximately 31%. This like for an average homeowner based on the township's draft budget. So this is the overall blended rate, you can say. The region's tax levy has been approved, and it represents an increase of 5.92%. That's the increase that has been used for this chart. However, I caution council that that could change once final tax policy and tax ratios are approved by the region of Niagara, but we're using that for this chart. Education rates have been announced, and this chart represents the actual education rates. So a blended rate would result in an increase of 4.77%, or $198 a year, which works out to about $16.50 a month. Now, in December, Council approved a new corporate strategic plan for the township. These are the main themes of that plan. The final budget document will include the detailed justification sheets for all the capital projects and all the special projects, and will also indicate what theme in the strategic plan the item is relating to. So that's something that we will endeavor to include as much as possible in the final budget product. This chart indicates the breakdown of the expenditure budget by department. Total expenditure is just over $9 million. This does not include water and wastewater. Those budgets have not been finalized. Council is reminded that they are funded 100% through rates. The final budget will have those figures. As the chart indicates, transportation services makes up the largest section of our township budget at 37%, followed by corporate management at 18%. This slide here is a representation of what you have in Schedule B to your budget report, which is a summary of expenditure by department. So now I'm just going to go over the main factors that have contributed to the levy increase. They're all outlined in your report as well, but I thought it would be helpful if they're highlighted in this presentation. So the first one is special projects funded through the operating fund, which has increased the levy by $158,000. There's two projects that are being funded through the operating fund. The first one is an economic development plan for the industrial park. That has a total cost of $60,000. $27,000 is through development charges, and $33,000 is through the operating fund. The other project at $125,000 is a Fulton Hamlet and Rural Employment Zone project. The next item that's putting pressure on the levy is $145,800. Staff is proposing the issuance of debentures in order to finance the replacement of Fire Station Number 2, as well as the funding of various road work. The estimated cost of Fire Station Number 2 is $1.9 million. The project is being funded with development charges and a small transfer from the Wind Turbine Community Fund Reserve. However, even with that funding, there's still a local share of $951,600. Within this budget, staff is proposing that a 20-year debenture forecasted at a rate of 3% be issued. The annual repayment of this debt would be $76,000 and has been included in the 2020 budget. That $76,000 repayment represents the highest repayment, and as the 20 years go pass, every year the repayment's a bit smaller. In addition, the 2020 budget includes $1.4 million in road resurfacing and repaving works. In order to complete all of this work, a debenture of $540,000 over 10 years at an estimated rate of 2.75% is budgeted for. Annual repayment for this debenture is $69,800, which again is included in this budget. The reason that staff is proposing this is at the present time, the rate of borrowing is very close to our actual rate of return that we're receiving on investments. Our investments are at about vary between 2.45% and 2.9%. We don't have enough funds in any of our reserves to fund all of these projects. So the alternative would be that these capital works would not be able to move forward in the current year or even in the next few years without this financing. Third item is the previous council approved the use of $150,000 of the road settlement funds to help fund project manager. These funds have now been depleted, so that position is funded 100% through the operating fund. In 2019, council approved several service level changes. When the 2019 budget was approved, only a portion of those service level changes were budgeted for, the portion that was impacting 2019. So now in 2020, we're budgeting for the remainder of those costs. And as a reminder, those service level changes approved were one additional arena parks operator, a customer service and admin clerk at the community center, part-time IT help desk position, the recreation programmer went from part-time to full-time, and the library increased part-time hours, and also there were Sunday openings at the library. Utilities, Staff have budgeted an increase of 5% for water costs, 8% for natural gas, and 10% for electricity. When applying these increases, they're applied to the actual 2019 costs. Compensation to staff, which includes both wages and benefits, is seeing an overall 3% increase to the 2019 budget. Again, that includes both statutory benefits, it includes pension costs, and group benefits. When we work on the budget, many of our expenditure lines end up having some inflationary pressures. A lot of the vendors that we use pass along their increased costs to us. So on average, it worked out to about a 2% increase to most of our budget lines, except of course for compensation. So that comes in at $45,000. Both the library and the arena have budgeted for an increase in the number of part-time staffing hours. In the arena budget, that's an increase of $15,700, and for the library, that's an increase of $25,000. We've increased some of the transfers to reserves. Winter control is increasing by $6,000, cemetery by $6,000, and the library by $15,000. So we do have some mitigating measures. So these are items that help to bring all those increased costs down. The first one is $200,000 interest revenue from township investments. We've been very fortunate that we've been able to get good rates and that we do have some funds invested. However, this is not an ongoing revenue source and may not be available in future budget years. The transfer to the capital reserve has been reduced by $38,000. The reserve policy is still being followed. We've, over the past few years, we've actually been putting in more to the capital reserve than the policy mandates. The reason this has been decreased is at the beginning of this chart, we're investing $145,800 into capital through debenture payments. So it's still an investment in capital, it's just in a different manner. And finally, there was a savings in streetlight costs of $20,100, and that's due to the LED lights that were put in, and the payment back to the reserve has been completed. So now the township can enjoy the savings from that project. I just want to talk a little bit about water and wastewater. In 2016, Council approved a water and wastewater rate study and a financial plan which recommended a 5% increase to user rates from 2016 to 2020. So this chart will highlight what the impact will be. We're proposing a 5% increase effective July 1st, which would impact the last two billings of 2020. The water and wastewater financial plan will be updated in 2020 as well. So that will give us some guidance for rates going forward from 2021 to 2025. So when you're reviewing the budget, please keep these items in mind. Every $69,000 of additional expenditure results in a 1% increase to the tax levy. A 1% increase to the tax levy equates to approximately a $12 increase in taxes. Another way of looking at it is every $10,000 of expenditure added will result in an approximately $1.78 increase in property taxes. Now, Schedule A to the budget report that you have outlines in detail the service level change requests and the annual impact to the budget. And as a reminder, these service level changes are not included in the base budget. They would be add-ons if approved. If council were to approve all of these requests, taxes would increase from the $74 to $116 increase. The first request is a supervisor of facilities, parks, and arena at an annual cost of $103,000. That's an annual cost. The establishment of a community improvement plan or a CIP plan, a reserve, for 100,000. A request for a new full-time position for a GIS and asset management coordinator. In 2020, this position is being funded with the modernization funds. Council will be reminded that earlier this year we received $725,000 to assist municipalities to become modern, to help pay for things that small municipalities have difficulty paying for. The proposal is to slowly phase in this position into the operating budget from 2021 to 2023. And the final one is a part-time admin position for the fire department. This is a part-time position with an annual cost of $36,000. Now, this chart summarizes to council the impact the draft budget has on reserves. Several reserves are under pressure, mainly the bridge, the road equipment, fire, and capital. The report this evening is recommending that a portion of the anticipated 29 surplus, and we're anticipating a surplus right now of about $250,000, is used to help out two reserves. One, the road equipment reserve, we're asking for a $125,000 transfer, and a $40,000 transfer to the fire reserve. If council does not approve that recommendation, some of the 2020 figures would have to be reworked because we would have to increase the transfer to these reserves. So now a little bit of a discussion about the capital budget. For 2020, just over $7.2 million is budgeted for. And this chart just shows council the expenditure by service area, with the largest expenditure within fire and roads. And this chart highlights the funding sources for capital. The largest source is reserves. And it should be noted that although this is a large transfer from reserves, many of the township's reserve funds function in this manner. They are built up, drawn down, and then built up again. Others, like water, wastewater, equipment, and fire, are contributed each year to ensure adequate funding. Development charges that are third largest are used to fund growth projects. You can also take note that we've also included the debenture financing of $1.4 million. This chart outlines the same 2020 capital budget, but it displays it by so this demonstrates that the biggest investment would be in facilities and surface treatment of roads. Now, the next part of the presentation outlines each service area and their 2020 budget. When the final budget document is given to council, there'll be a justification sheet for every single one of these projects. And just as a reminder, we separate capital between tangible capital assets that you can, something that you can see and touch, and special projects, which are usually studies and items like that. Okay. The first service area being presented is corporate services, and some of the projects under corporate services is the replacement of the front and rear sidewalks of Town Hall. In addition, modernization funds of $275,000 are being used to fund various projects that will assist in providing services in a more efficient and effective manner. Under fire, the most significant investment, of course, is the replacement of the Caister Fire Hall, or Fire Station number 2. And these slides all show the expenditure and how each item is being funded. In this slide, the largest item here is the replacement of a tandem at $310,000. This is the slide for a road work with a total budget of just over $1.4 million. Bridges, there isn't a huge budget this year. There's quite a few projects that are being carried forward into 2020, however, that were approved in prior years. This service area, roadside services, this is where we budget for sidewalk work, which is $195,000, as well as we have the continued removal and replacement of ash trees in the municipality. And that's funded from the operating fund, as it has been in past years. For wastewater, $750,000 of wastewater main work is related to the region's Highway 20 project. The region, their asset is the road, but the water and wastewater is the township's asset, and we're responsible for that. For water, again, the major project, $360,000 is related again to the work along the Highway 20 in Smithville. Cemetery, there's a removal of the Caser Baptist Cemetery, the church demolition. And under parks, there's an additional pickup truck that has been budgeted for, which is connected to the service level change request. Also included is a band shell at the West Lincoln Community Center, with $30,000 of funding being provided from the region in relation to the Canada Games project. And there's also a planned playground at the Caserville Library, which was an action item in the corporate strategic plan that council approved. Under streetlights, there's a project to complete the conversion of all the streetlights in the urban area of West Lincoln. As the last subdivisions that have been assumed by the municipality still have the old style lights, so this is to convert all of those. There's a borrowing from the contingency reserve to do this with a payback over 6 years. And the first year of the payback has been budgeted for in this budget. And these are the library projects. A lot of it is their annual collection upgrades, their expansion of their collections, which is partly funded through development charges. And the two planning projects listed here were discussed earlier in this presentation. So this slide is a summary of the 10-year capital forecast, which projects capital needs from 2020 to 2029. And the projected cost is $73.8 million. If you look at Schedule H of your report, there's detailed 10-year capital plans for each service area. And that gives council a sense of what work staff is projecting will be required over the next 10 years. And this chart outlines the required funding in order to complete that 10-year capital plan. At the current rate of contribution, many of the above reserves would not have the required funds in place to meet the capital demands. We often call this an infrastructure deficit. And it's something that all levels of government struggle with. It's just not something West Lincoln is dealing with. Every municipality has this issue. Debenture financing has been introduced throughout the 10-year capital plan as a method of financing these capital projects. The alternative would be to delay or cancel projects. A fully developed asset management plan integrated with the budget will assist staff and council with determining what the greatest needs are and what is affordable. 10-year capital plans such as this have only been something the township's been doing since 2015. So there's always room for improvement and more data, and every year is an improvement. So that's the end of the presentation. It's open for questions.
Thank you. So I guess before we do the questions, I should read the rest of the recommendation, and then we can get a mover and a seconder, and then we can open it up. So there's a recommendation before us that report RFD-T-01-20 regarding the 2020 draft operating capital budget preliminary report dated January 21st, 2020 be received for information. and that council approve a 2019 budget amendment authorizing the transfer $125,000 into the equipment reserve and $40,000 into the fire reserve, which will be funded through the 2019 estimated surplus of $250,000. Do I have a mover? So Mayor Bilsma, seconder is Councillor Ganan. Any questions? I guess I'm opening the floor up now to questions. So who wants to go first? Nobody? I'm sure we got a couple of questions. I will get there. Don't worry. So actually, I'll make one comment right now. Through going through some of the notes here, I caught partway through a rookie mistake. I don't know. Nobody called me on it. So not to pass the buck by any means, but I forgot to allow the gallery to address items on the agenda. So we will be going back to that afterwards. So my sincere apology. Oh, you just let me slide? Okay. Well, thank you. Did you? Okay. My sincere apology. We will go back to that. But right now, we'll just focus on the report here and comments from committee. So, so Councillor Ganan, did you want to go first?
I can go first. I have a few things. Some of them were answered actually tonight. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is the issue of assessment growth. And I am going to start by saying that I did approach already our Director of Finance about this question because I know that people are always talking about what's happening with growth. So when I went back over old reports, I noticed that in 2017 in our budget that the assessment growth was mitigated with $111,000. 2018 it was $222,000. By 2019 it was $153,000, and this year the estimated amount is $1.86 or $128,000. So my question to our director, which she kindly answered already for me, but I'm going to ask her, as I stated I would, to publicly answer, is why this discrepancy in the numbers? What's happened in terms of growth in West Lincoln that means that we can count on less mitigation of our all the costs and things that we cannot change, the things that we have to deal with and we have to face. This was sort of a one little avenue of gaining a way to take some away from that. So if you would, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. DeFilippis, what can you tell us about that for the public record, please?
Yeah. Through you, Chairman Riley, to Councillor Ganan. So assessment growth is any gains the township has had in assessment, which is usually new builds, additions to homes. And it fluctuates every year. And it's obviously related to the number of buildings going up, number of builds, and it's also linked to the amount of development charges collected. So one way of looking at it is when we budget for supplementary taxes. So during the year, there's taxes that come in during the year. When those are low in a given year, you're guaranteed that the following year when we present the budget, you're not going to have a lot of growth. It's all linked to that. Our development charges are less in 2019. Our building permit revenue is less in 2019, and this has resulted in a lower growth figure. And again, this is the average growth for the entire municipality. Sometimes a certain sector might have like if you're looking at industrial, maybe that went up, but another one didn't go up as much. So it's an average overall. And really, it's a function of what's going out in the economy, like what's happening in West Lincoln. It's not something that we do, like Treasury has any control over personally.
Okay, so thank you for that answer, and thank you for explaining that. I don't know how many people watch the videos. We don't have as many people in the gallery as I thought we might have, but I think that is a really good thing for people to understand what that means. So to me, that says two things. One is the fact that although the assumption out there is that we are growing way too quickly, in actual fact, our growth is steady and moderate, and there's nothing wrong with that. So when there are all these things on Facebook and out in the public and in general conversations about, oh, Smithville's getting too big too quickly, in actual fact, the data shows that that's not necessarily true. So I think that's an important point for people to know. And the other thing is, it certainly also shows why we need growth. because we need to have, that extra, the homes being built and that's shown, as you pointed out, through the DCs that are collected and so on. And so we really do need to have that additional growth over time if we're going to be able to lower the taxes for everybody else. I point out that there was an article in The Spectator that some of you may have seen about they're going to have this high tax rate of 3.5%, but it also talks about the $45 million that they're going to bring in other revenue. So the fact that our budget is relatively small in the grand schemes of things, really it points out how very important each of those $100,000 points are. So thank you.
Yeah, and just to add through you, Chairman Riley, to Councillor Ganad, the way to look at growth is it's the amount the levy can go up with no impact to taxpayers, because there's
Correct.
more assessment going into the pot or the bowl or whatever you want to call it. There's more going in, so there's an amount that we can increase the levy and there's no impact to taxes, and that's what that represents.
Great. Thank you very much. That's good for now. I'll let somebody else take a turn.
Mayor Bilsma?
So it's not quite that simple. I know we often refer to assessment growth as kind of like, eating away at the taxes, but the assessment growth is that, we've had as high as 3 and almost 4% in other years. If the community grows by 3%, conceivably, it's gobbled up very quickly by the increase in services that are necessary to administer that 3% growth. So at some point, there's going to be an increase to fire service, and at some point, there's going to be an increase to faculty, to staff and facilities to and it's done incrementally, but we see that creep in the size of the organization that's necessary to address the increase in assessment growth. So conceivably, if we have no growth, we don't need new facilities. We just need to make them bigger. We don't need to increase the size of the organization and the structure that's necessary to propel the municipality forward. So if we had zero growth, then there are items in here which we wouldn't need to do, because we wouldn't need that increase in service. So I look at some items like the half FTE at the library, or the increase from a part-time FTE to a full-time FTE, and I see that as being offset by that growth, because there's more people in the community, more houses in the community. The extra plow driver that we had last year was an example of something that takes into consideration eventually we have more roads, and we need that extra service because we have the extra growth. So when you boil it all down and you have a 6%, 8%, and take the 2% off in assessment growth, and we pass on a 6% increase, that is in fact a 6% increase. Inflationary costs, you can quite simply say if inflationary costs are 2%, then taxes could go up 2%, and that offsets the inflationary cost. The assessment growth itself is reflected in the additional FTEs and those little service changes, that increases that we do because our community is growing. So really, when it boils down to the 6% that we're proposing, 6.48 is in fact higher service levels at some. You can maybe take the 2% inflationary cost off of there, but so we're looking at a 4% increase in service levels. That's how I see it. That's how I understand it. And we might be able to use different semantics, but ultimately, to say that we always need to grow, I think is, because then people start to make silly decisions when we don't have that growth, and they start, getting into a panic. If we stay stable, then our tax rate should stay stable as well. We would look at no service increases, and we could survive for many, many years. So I just wanted to see that we could look at that interplay between the tax increase, inflationary costs, and assessment growth a little bit differently, or we could view it a little bit differently. That's my first comment. What do you deal with those? My challenge, I've said this many, many times before, is starting to debenture. And I understand that we've inherited kind of an infrastructure gap from many councils previous, because we never really did an asset management plan. But one area that I feel that we have had significant asset management planning is in fire service. So one of the things that just kind of raises a bit of an alarm is the idea that we need to debenture for Station 2. Now, I've been to Station 2, and I know the shape that it's in, and I know what it's housed, and I've even spoke to the chief about that. But I'm concerned that we, in the program that kind of runs independently alongside, or at least it has its kind of its own system in managing and counting, that we still need to debenture for something that, for the 5 years I've been here, and it looked like we inherited for a long time, we're looking at debenturing for the particular project. I thought that we would have that addressed in the reserve fund, that would have the flexibility to grow. We make a purchase on rolling stock, or so through you, Mr. Chair, to a Director of, why are we looking at a debenture in that particular item in what my opinion is kind of a well-established reserve fund that should have been addressed? And do we alleviate that? Like, I understand we would run into problems if we defer it back too much, but can we not defer it back till the reserve fund is at a sufficient level to pay for the station, and so on and so forth? So why are we behind in that particular account?
Through you, Chairman Riley, to Mayor Bilsma. So in the current budget, regarding the debenture, it's a $321,000 transfer to the equipment, to the fire reserve. Yeah. And if council remembers, a few years ago, we upped that transfer significantly, because I think it was only $200,000 or $250,000. That is enough just to cover the equipment replacements. It does not cover the facility.
Oh, okay.
If we were to cover the facility in that manner, you'd be looking at a significant increase to that transfer, and it would take a few years to get the cash in that reserve to get there. The issue we're facing is every year we do a budget and we do our 10-year capital plan, and then the tenders go out for these pieces of equipment, and they're all over budget. I shouldn't say they're all over budget, but many of them are over budget. A lot of it is because we pay US dollars. So that plan, it's like, okay, next year we have to put more into the reserve, and we keep increasing it. And that is just covering replacements of what we have.
Yeah.
It's not addressing this replacement of a fire hall.
That's an answer that I didn't want to hear, but at least it kind of explains why we're not catching up to the facility. All right.
And I just...
Yeah, you may.
Further, there's a section in the report where I talk about reserves, and I talk about the capital reserve, and I note that the increases we would have to be putting into these reserves in the future in order to meet some of these needs, and they're significant increases. So.
Yeah. So I have this bugaboo about debenturing, and I understand, from a business perspective, also the fact that it's very low interest and it matches. So we're really not losing ground, which is very reassuring for me. So I want to let you know that I have that bugaboo, but I also at the same time can appreciate from a business perspective, we're not losing ground very quickly. But eventually we have to, come to that point where we don't debenture because we're properly reserving and doing an asset management that covers our basis as the material, as the facilities and infrastructure decays, that we have matching funds to replace that. Because it seems two directional. We're going in two different directions if we're going to have a reserve policy and a debenture policy. I like to play in one field or the other. So either it's the reserve policy or we debenture everything. Obviously, my preference is to have the robust reserve policy. Just another question that came up with respect to 2020 capital special projects. There's an addition to the fleet for a ball diamond tractor. How many ball diamonds will that be servicing? Is that a tractor that goes through all of our facilities, goes to Wellandport and Abingdon and does our, like, does it, the 10, is that, I want to, it's $50,000, I want to know. That's 1% for our.
Through you, Councillor Chairman Riley, to Mayor Bilsma, I'll try to answer it if what I remember. Otherwise, our Director of Public Works, I believe it's the size of the tractor that they're requesting. There's certain areas that they can't get into because of the size of the equipment, so this will be able to allow them to service all of the ball diamonds more effectively. And if I can just make one comment about reserves and debenture. The reason you have reserves and debenture is there's a lot of assets you would never debenture for. I would never recommend that you debenture for a fire truck or any vehicle. I would never ask you to debenture for a sidewalk. So for those kind of assets, you are going to need reserves to help fund them. There's other assets where sometimes it makes sense to debenture for. So that's why you will see a mixture of the two different financing plans.
That's all for now. We'll let other.
Okay, Councillor Tremetta?
Thank you, new Chair Riley. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'd like to say, Donna, thank you for Mr. Philippus. Thank you for this Cole's Notes version for me for the budget. It's always a pleasure than the big binder that we used to get every year. I really like it. It helps me read it thoroughly. I'd also like to say I don't know if this goes to our CAO, thanks for our little handy booklet. This is going to be a way of our future for the next 3 years. And actually, I want to commend you for helping me out changing the words, ongoing priorities. I like that. That's what I wanted to see. So I guess I'm going to refer this to his booklet as our new little Bible for West Lincoln now, and I really like to, follow it and continue with it. I see a couple things in the budget. I do find 6.48 is high. I've done this a couple times, and I think we can trim this a bit. We can find ways to trim it. I understand it's preliminary, and I think there's some things we can cut in there. I circled a few things that I could, and it's no offense to anybody in particular or any ward. I'm just going quickly, real quick, and I think, the time of just a question was when we worked on the MERS back then. There was talk of a band shell. We never did it. I don't think we really need it. I still think it's not a major thing that sorry, I know that people don't like the word MERS, but the West Lincoln Community Center needs, to see $100,000 go there, and also a new pavilion for the Leisureplex. I think that's somewhere else we can cut at the moment. To maintain other things that we see in the budget. I don't want to really. I always see that there's always a need for staff, and I don't want to see that get cut before things that I think that we don't need. But right there, you can see a $220,000 savings that I think we could go without, or we can do another year. I don't think that's a necessity that we need just by me going through this. There's a couple questions I need to ask through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Director. How adamant are we on the sidewalk repairs? Is it just part of your sidewalk replacement program? Is it Are we deficient in some of the sidewalks in Caister and around Town Hall? I've walked these sidewalks, they looked okay, but.
To clarify, that's Director of Public Works? that you're
To
asking?
the Director
Okay.
of Public Works, yeah.
Through the chairman and Councilor Trombetta, there's really 3 sidewalk replacement projects, 2 of them, Wade Road North and Highway 20 project. So I would suggest we keep that in order to get best bang for our buck.
Okay.
John Street, that's the sidewalk, just one block of sidewalk in Caister Center. It's in poor shape, and the budget item is $75,000 to replace that. So that's just a summary of why those 3 sidewalk sections are in the budget.
The other thing I had, I don't know if this is through you, Mr. Chair, to the Director, or is it to Mr. Treble, the church, like, how is we in cost for the church? I thought the church was separate. Why are we in charge of demolishing a church? Like, according to a bunch of emails flying about cemeteries recently that we don't have any, there's some cemeteries that we don't own. Why do we am responsible for demolishing the church, or is you don't know?
Through you, Chairman Riley, to Councillor Trombetta, the legislation, if a cemetery ceases to have the ability to operate, legislation requires a municipality to take over those cemeteries. And in this case, the church is in such disrepair, it's safer to remove it. It's being funded through the cemetery reserve, and that is why we've increased our transfer to the cemetery reserve through this budget. And if I can just say one item about when council is looking through the capital projects, by all means, if there's something you don't want to go forward, but I caution you to always look at how it's funded. The elimination of a project will not necessarily have any impact on the levy.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you on that. So the whole thing, and I was just going to touch on this as well. I'm not against the debenture of the fire hall, pay now or pay later. I always look at it that way. That fire hall has been, we did a bit of a lipstick job on it to kind of keep it up to par because it was pretty much falling down. A couple years ago, we kind of just touched it up. I'm not against debenturing it. Like I said, either we pay now or pay later. We're going to end up paying for a new fire hall the way we look at it or not. It's coming down the pipe. It's been in the 10-year capital for a long time. I think it needs to be done. So I will speak advocately about that. The other question I had, and I know this is really far-fetched to think this way, but I know there's a grant that was out there through you, Madam CAO, for the in place for the community center in Abingdon. Am I correct? Is there anything that could coincide with the fire hall? My vision is you use the grant a little bit in some senses to help maybe take some space away and build the fire hall at the same time. Is that possible? I know with your expertise, like yes or no or maybe.
So through you, Chair Riley, to Councillor Trombetta. So I think first of all, we did make an application
Correct.
for under the ISIP recreation grant. So, and that went in the end of November. And it was a very comprehensive application. So I don't, and that's what's being considered right now. So it's a really detailed process where that goes to the province, and then the province makes the decision about whether or not they should be submitting it to the feds for their portion. So that, and they take a long time to go through. And I don't know if we can actually amend that application.
I'm not asking, like I wasn't kind of amending. I'm thinking like if you can utilize the same space of somehow and then piggyback on that with ours.
Okay, so that may be another question then, and I think that we have chatted a little bit about that in the past. Is there an opportunity for the fire hall to be on the same piece of land as the Addington Community Hall?
Something like that, or I guess
I think I'm going to be asking our
quietly convert a portion of that new Abingdon Hall to a fireplace, fire hall.
I like
I'm
your
trying to look at it
thinking.
thinking like that, outside the box, kind of.
The only, we have had a lot of discussions about that, and particularly, it's an emergency service. This is not combining an administrative building and a community hall, or a library and a community hall. This is an emergency service. And I think that there's a real concern, and I'll certainly let the fire chief speak to this as well, but they don't, they're not compatible.
So they're not, okay, that's what I need, that's what I just wanted to hear. I was just thinking outside the box and just wondering. But again, I'm still in big favor of redoing Fire Station 2. It's a long time. That used to be the old Public Works yard that got converted into a fire station. What's never been, been efficient enough for a fire station. We've been there a lot for 25 years, a long time. So I'm not against the debenturing it. I say pay now or pay later. Pay now or pay later. We're going to have to. Like I said, I think as council we can trim this a bit. We can bring these taxes down by, I said, there's a couple of things that I just pointed out real quick. I'm quite sure maybe, sorry, Madam Chair, go ahead. I mean, Madam CEO.
Yeah, Madam CEO, would speak.
So two things I just want to point out. The base, or I guess the type of fire hall that's being contemplated is very basic, and I think it's the Camden Hall is the most recently built one in the area. So it's just 2 bays and a small administrative section and a training area and a place for bunker gear. It's quite modest. It's not an elaborate fire hall at all.
Okay.
And that's where the pricing came from. And then as our treasurer was pointing out, some of the projects that you picked out are now currently funded through development charges and the Parkland Reserve, and not necessarily a levy item.
Okay.
So,
But there's a portion of that is a levy on that. Am I correct?
I guess it would be the reimbursement of the reserve. So it's moving money around.
Yeah. May I ask?
So,
Ms. DeFilippis, how much the band shell in the pavilion? How much is on the levy?
A little background about the band shell. The Canada Games that Niagara is hosting, there's a $30,000 grant that I think our municipality will be able to receive because there's an event that we are to hold related to that Canada Games. So that's why it's in the budget, partly funded, I think through Parkland.
Correct, but the 70,000 is taken out of the reserve to fund the rest, correct?
No, I believe, let me just check
Am I
that
wrong?
one. I think it's Parkland.
Yeah, it's in lieu of Parkland, the band show.
Yeah, is it, so that, if you were to cancel that project, then that would allow some, the in lieu of Parkland fund would be available to fund another project. There would be no impact to the tax levy with that decision. The second one.
The pavilion?
Yeah, 1 second.
So that's Parkland as well as development charges and the grant as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're
No, it's right here.
quicker
I
than
was-
me.
I was looking for it. when
Yeah,
you brought it
so,
up. It's 156,100 in Parkland, 30,000 grant, and just under 34,000 development charges. So again, I don't think we would see any real difference on the tax levy, other than we just leaving space in the reserves for other projects. But then I'm assuming we would probably lose the $30,000 grant for both those items if we were to hypothetically remove those? Or is that grant money just something that we could apply to anything?
the 30,000 is specific for the Canada Day
It is.
event.
Okay, yeah.
Canada Games. Yeah.
Sorry.
I knew what you meant.
So if we trim those out, that's really not going to do anything,
It won't make a difference.
but pretty much.
Yeah. So, all right, sorry, Councilor Trabelli.
Okay, no, I'm probably going to come back, Councillor.
So for now,
Sure.
I'm going to give Councillor Jonker a chance. And your mic's on, too.
Yeah, I guess that's the same thing, like I'm always trying to look through the budget and go, okay, can we cut this? Is this gonna save us? Like, and I guess that's where I'll probably run into the same wall as Counselor, but I guess so. My question is on the page where we, through you, Mr. Chair, to Director of Financing, the service level change requests not included in base budget. That is gonna affect us? Like, that, right? Is those 4 requests gonna go, would they be hit on the levy? Or is that on top yet?
Through you, Chairman Riley, to Councillor Jonker. So these service level requests are not in the base budget. They are part of, if you look at the overview, the point third from the bottom, it would result, if all of them are approved, it would result in a 9.92% levy increase or $116. Okay. The way they've been included in the budget is 100% of the costs have been included. You will recall in 2019, we included a portion of service level changes and the balance was in 2020. We've presented to council the full impact in a year. So you can see what the full impact is, and that's what's included. The one service level request, the third one, the GIS and Asset Management Coordinator, that one for 2020 is being funded 100% with the modernization funds. The plan is in 2021, 2/3 would be funded from modernization, 2022, 1/3, and eventually in 2023, it would be 100% on the tax levy. I hope that provides a little bit more clarification.
Do you have any other questions? You good?
Counselor.
All right. Oh,
Sorry.
I'll go back to
Go
you,
back.
Councillor Schroeder. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to follow up with Councillor Yonker, I know the staffing is an important thing, which I questioned that at the strategic planning meeting. I know we had, I wish I saw it there, because at the strategic planning, there was no real specific item to, and I understand you guys are going to come back and say, well, if we want to get these things, we need staff to do these things, and I totally get that. But we got to find a place where we can cut, to come in at a 6.48% increase. It's too high. I can't support something that high. That would be more higher than any term of council I think I've done in the past 5 years. So I won't be in support of the 6.48. I think staff can find somewhere where we can trim. I don't know if that's, I think we got to give something up as we always do, and that's unfortunate because everybody puts everything in the basket, and then hopefully, hopefully we walk away with the basket, or hopefully we pull those eggs out of the basket. And I think we need to look at some of these hires and find some place where we can trim. But I guess that's for future discussions. I don't know, we're only receiving this at the moment, so nothing is set in stone, but our comments are made tonight to, hopefully go back to staff and they can come back and hopefully we can cut a little bit somewhere and we go from there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Trebetta. Director, it looked like she wanted to make a statement there, and then I'm going to go to Councillor
Yep,
Mann
through
after.
to you, Councillor Chairman Riley. I just want to remind council, in terms of staffing increases, the bulk of them are service level changes. The only ones that are not is when I'm explaining the budget increase, there has been an increase in part-time staffing, but that's to keep the level of service the way it is. There's just been too much of a draw. Full-time staff can't take care of the library and arena appropriately. That is the only staffing increase that is in the base budget. Any other staffing increase is a service level change. So cutting a service level change is not going to impact the 6.48% increase.
Okay, that's good to know. Councillor Ganam?
I'm on. So before I go any further, first of all, Dawn, I didn't the last time congratulate you on how well put together and how well organized this whole process was. The agenda package, and Councillor Trombetta alluded to that. I read and read and read over the weekend, and then still made my notes. And the fact that you have included so many details meant that I didn't have to go back so far and look for things, and I really do appreciate that. And I'm sure that each department, when they presented what they wanted to you, also wanted wanted and being kind of careful about that. But I do think that I agree with the other councillors in that the budget amount right now is just way, way too high, and we do need to look at it again. So I think we're back to, as somebody once said, separating what we want to have and what we wish to have with what we really need to have. The one item I see in terms of a service level that I think that in going back, when staff goes back and looks at all of this, I think the one thing that we probably need, since I've listened to everybody talk about asset management, is perhaps a really good close look at how much we do need the asset management position that is provided in number 3 of service level requests. I think that somebody to actually look after all of that is going to be in the long term extremely important. I really appreciate the fact that it has been is sort of taken advantage of the modernization grant. I think that's exactly the kind of thing that this grant was meant to do, is to bring municipalities up to speed in terms of making sure that they have a good, solid asset management plan that is being well utilized. And if we're really moving forward in a way such that when we make major decisions about the things that we need and the things that we don't need, if we are looking at the good core data as to what we really do need to have, and we're using that plan, then we need to have a really firmly established plan. And presently, I don't see anybody on staff who can add that extra hat to their job load already. And so requests that are there, that's pretty crucial. And I would certainly be in favor of seeing that happen. Having said that, I think that the region this year has really put us under the gun in terms of budget. When we talk about $116 added to our taxes, that's only the West Lincoln portion of the taxes. And I think this council and staff, as we look at what we're going to cut back and how we're going to get that number down, we have to keep in mind that the region has already set that. So they've already added a good chunk to what people will actually pay on their taxes. And those taxes are based on what they call, as you pointed out, a home valued around the $380,000, $390,000 mark. And we know that there are fewer and fewer of those homes left in West Lincoln. You know, the way the costs have gone up, we are looking at people paying much higher than that $116 added to the $135 from the region. And if you happen to live in town, you're also paying an additional $74 on top of that to look after your sidewalks and street light. So when we're looking at all of that, we're really asking West Lincoln residents to pay close to $500, maybe $600 difference, depending on the cost of their homes. If we're looking at newer members, newer people who've moved to West Lincoln, we know that the value of those houses are certainly far more than some of what our homes are presently. So I think we have to be mindful of that as we try to bring down this percentage. And as I mentioned earlier, percentage is kind of a false sense of what it really is. When you're talking about 9.92%, it's very scary. That sounds horrific. When you're looking at the dollar value, not so bad, but still a lot more than a lot of people who live in West Lincoln who are on fixed incomes can actually handle. So I think when we look at presenting this 2020 budget, we know we have lots of tough decisions, but I think that we have to really, really look carefully, each department, to see where it is that we can cut back a little bit. As you pointed out, you know, $69,000 is a 1% movement up or down on the tax levy and the overall tax levy, and I think that we have to do our very best in the next few weeks to see what we can do about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ganane. All right, I'll go back to Mayor Bilsma, and then I'll make a comment after.
Thank you. So I had just a few subsequent questions. The first one has to do, what's become of we had a couple of windfalls last year. We had the doubling up of the gas tax, and we had another one from the province. So do they have a role to play in this budget as well? Is there some kind of tax relief that can come through those two that kind of windfalls that came through last year? I know part of our strat plan was to spend $30,000 of that money, and I think there was a modernization fund. Where do they come to play in this budget?
Director of Finance.
Through you, Chairman Riley.
I don't think your mic's on.
Oh. Through you, Chairman Riley, to Mayor Bilsma. In terms of the increase in the gas tax, there are some projects that we may need those funds for based on tender prices. I'll leave it like that right now. Okay. Yep. In terms of the modernization, There's quite a bit of use of the modernization funds in this budget. We're using $100,000 under the wastewater budget to do some sewer condition assessments. The project's $200,000, half of it's being funded through modernization.
yeah.
We're also using modernization funds to help finance some of those projects under corporate services. That would be really difficult to do without that extra fund.
Yeah.
A lot of it is IT related, and the reason is that a lot of efficiencies are linked to automation and using internet and IT, and we need to know, okay, what do we need as a basis in order to make all of that happen? There's a request for budget software, which will make this whole process much more efficient and much nicer product for the public. We're asking for some of those funds to go towards this proposed GIS asset management position. So I think it is being well utilized. It took us a while. We didn't want to rush and spend it at once. But we're trying to apply it to projects that really, truly will modernize the township.
And give us a return on investment.
I think so, because in terms of a lot of the IT investment, you're paying for software, but at the end of the day, it's getting a lot of those processes done. It's still the most efficient way of doing it. The budget software will make this entire process much more effective for council, and it will allow staff to spend more time doing long-term financial planning.
I just want to make sure that we understand that the modernization fund in its inception, at least the way the province directed us, is that it would kind of be spent, it would be retired, or there would be like a return on investment that would allow the municipalities also to be able to save funds, because we're all in the same pinch. The provincial government, the regional government, and the municipality are all trying to make struggles. They were making this investment in us that, in that sense, should retire. It's an expenditure that should not be ongoing, and something that we should be saddled with in the future. If we make the investment, it should be self-sustaining. That was one question. I want to caution my colleagues. 6.48, it's high. I understand that. It's not way high. I think we'll be very happy if we can get this to a respectable level of, say, 4 and 5. That's very typical to what our compatriot municipalities are doing, which brings me to, for 3 years we had to absorb increases to take on the project of the community center. Now, there's a good take-up of that by the community. I get comments and on it all the time, how people are enjoying it. So let's recognize that that was a good investment. But for 3 years, we've absorbed 5%. So this is really the first natural increase to the service levels of our organization in 4 years. So I think, we understand that an expensive bird has come home to roost. For 3 years, we've been trying to absorb this service level, the FTEs that were required. And I don't really want to hash up old things. They've been said, they're on the record. So this is, in that sense, somewhat necessary to catch the municipality as a whole up, because we've absorbed so much for the West Lincoln Community Center. So I just want to kind of get that on the record. Often, so this is a comment to the Director of Finance through you, Mr. Chair. Often you give us a slide that shows us how we are in comparison to other lower area municipalities for context. And I know sometimes you've expressed that you don't really like to do that because you don't want to cast aspersion sideways, but just kind of understanding a context is usually very good for the way that we it gives us a level of comfort. I've heard, I communicate with other mayors and I hear their increases, and I just want to understand context. So if you can get that information, just kind of okay.
Mm-hmm. Through you, Chairman Riley, to Mayor Bilsma, I usually present that at the budget open house.
Okay.
The budget open house goes into a little bit more detail about the metrics. I purposely don't present it here.
Oh, okay.
Because I prefer this meeting to concentrate on the township budget without worrying about what other municipalities are doing, because at the end of the day, it's about the services in the township.
Yeah.
But I do present it at the budget open house so the public understands where we sit among our neighbors.
Yeah. So just then one or two final comments with respect to the service level change requests. Number one, and I understand the challenges. We did have great uptake of the West Lincoln Community Center in our by our community, and we have made significant increases in the staffing of that in order to accommodate that. But I'm really going to have to speak against number one just by saying, while I appreciate it, I think that this is not the time yet to approach getting another FTE there, and I'm just going to leave it at that point, just to get it on the record as a concern. Number two, the establishment of a CIP. I see this as also being something that I really can't rally behind simply because I think it's redundant. There is a program already run by the region through some of those, through the regional roads network that comes through our municipality. And without understanding exactly what the vision is for that and how it fits into our strategic plan at this point, I really can't envision myself supporting the $100,000 for that to the operating. So those are two that were in that service level change request that I just wanted to get comments on. The next two, nobody wants to see things increase, but I can at least appreciate how, with the modernization funds, it should be self-retiring or at least have a return on investment that would be effective for the taxpayers. And the bottom one is just a small amount that I think would be profitable for the organization in the fire department. One thing that I don't see here, and it comes up every year, and it's kind of the white elephant in the room, the paving of new roads, or the increase in service level of our gravel roads. I know we've done a road needs study. I see nothing kind of allotted in that towards that. So I don't know if that was still, we don't have any results for that because the road needs study is not. So if I can get an answer from the Director of Public Works.
Absolutely.
Nodding.
Okay, through the chair to Mayor Bilsma. The roads need study, we're still collecting information. It's ongoing. We plan to finalize that report and all the funding scenarios and all that good stuff in March or April of this year. So that's why it wasn't included in this year's budget. We're still collecting data and looking at all the different scenarios. But at that presentation, I think the good thing about this year's roads need study is we're definitely looking at gravel roads, and we're trying to figure out what's sustainable to sustain our existing network and how much are we going to need if we do embark in improving our gravel road system. And then there'll be some numbers set aside for that, and council will see that. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, so I'll make a couple comments here, and then I'll see if anyone else has anything else, and then we can move forward. I guess I'll just mention, since the mayor brought it up about the supervisor role there, I think it's important to look at. I think it's easy for us to say we don't need certain positions, especially when we're looking at it from a financial speaking position. But I think it's important to acknowledge the amount of stress that's already on our staff with the amount of extra responsibilities they have and they go through. I think it's just a matter of time before, we hit that brink and they can't do it anymore, and operation shuts down. That being said, I even in my own notes, I was hopeful that we could somehow find a way to trim 1% to 2%. But looking through everything, I really struggle to find where that 1% or 2% can come from. We don't necessarily have a situation where this is, we're, I guess, doing, luxury spending or anything like that by any means. But I think even more so, I have a concern, especially with our, the recent our development charges being under review by LPAT, like what impact's that going to have on us? Like no one's talking about that potential thing. We don't know what the outcome's gonna be. We're hopeful that, it's gonna stand, but, that's gonna be an issue. The other thing we haven't talked about is what and I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll direct this question to Madam CAO, but like, what is our contribution aspect going to be for the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital? It's on stage 2 now, and all the adjoining municipalities are going to have to chip in some portion of it. We're not talking about a couple bucks. We got to be talking about millions of dollars. And there's, from what I can see right now, I think we have something in reserve. I don't think it's going to be significantly enough. So, Madam CAO, would you mind talking a little bit about that?
I can speak to it quite generally at this point in time. There is an expectation that the local municipalities will be making a significant contribution to the hospital, and it probably is a greater percentage than it was ever contemplated back 20 years ago. And I think at that time we actually did set aside $1.25 million as we were requested to do, and that's been sitting there, but it hasn't been sitting in an account where it's been accruing interest. It's just been sitting there as is. So there's a lot of work that's underway with the foundation and the other municipalities and potentially the region. So we aren't even at a point yet where we can define the number, but it is certainly a future liability for a great asset. So.
Okay, thank you. So I guess with that being said, like I don't really know, I guess where we even go from here as far as what our expectation of staff. Are we hoping that staff will come back to us and find some spots where they, think they can tighten up and just see what that presentation looks like on the 18th? Is that the general consensus here?
Further to that, the other piece that we need to add on is the transportation piece that we
Yes.
just heard tonight that doesn't appear anywhere, obviously. And so
Assuming that's
another
the-
consideration.
Yeah, absolutely, Madam CEO.
So, it wasn't a coincidence that we brought them here tonight. That they were finishing up their round of presentations that they're making across the region, and what you heard tonight was Pelham and Lincoln had a local transit program, and it was a bus, or I think in the case of Lincoln, it was one bus, the U-Link, that went around all day long and did not have great ridership uptake. Pelham, I think, had 2 buses and also did not have great ridership uptake, and they were both spending about $250,000, and I'm saying that as an approximation annually for that service. So they've made the decision to convert those funds, so to cease the operation of those buses and to change it towards a local on-demand program. So in addition to what the region is providing and will be providing right now, which is where anybody in West Lincoln can get on the phone or on an app and request a ride from either their home or corner and go to another municipality that, for example, like to the GO train station in Grimsby for $6, or to the St. Catharines bus station, and then get a transfer to go on another local bus to go to another destination. They are going to do, Pelham and Lincoln have decided to do an intra-municipal service as well. So for $3, you'll be able to go from, potentially from someone's home to the hospital for $3. And as the presenters are saying, is they can't go to a regional stop, so they actually, without having that local service. Whereas we sort of have the advantage of being able to go to any other regional transit stop within the system for the $6. They needed to augment it. So Grimsby is contemplating their addition, and they had referred it to their budget discussion. If you want to refer $250,000 to have intra-municipal transit service, on-demand transit service, as they presented tonight, in addition to the inter-municipal transit service, then someone could make a motion and have us investigate that. And I'll leave it at that.
Did you have a question, Councilor Trunker? Okay. You don't want to touch that right now? Yeah, that's, I'm not too sure where to go with that. All right, I guess that being the case, sorry, go ahead again.
So we're all listening, and we hear that you'd like to have it reduced. And what our treasurer has presented today are really good pieces of information about the cost. So last year, we asked for some service increases related to the new community center, and you know that we didn't actually fund them fully. We didn't annualize them in 2019, so now they're annualized. So they aren't a regular 2% increase. They are taking a half-year position and making it a full-time position. If we have to go away from that, then that would be a service reduction. So I want to make that really clear. So that was $78,000 that were associated with those sorts of costs. The utilities costs that the treasurer also presented, they are not a 2% increase, and they are set not by us, they are set by the utilities. We have no control over that. And I don't think that's sort of an area for adjustment. So, you know, staff always will do what you ask us to do, but I need you to tell us what you want us to look at, or I'll come back with a whole bunch of options. This will only be my second budget, so I can't say always yet. So maybe that'll be questions.
Sorry, Mr. Sorry, I thought we did come back with options last year. If we're correct on it, did we not come back with some options last year, or was it in the year in past?
I believe what we did is it was staff recommendations.
Okay.
In previous years, perhaps like 2016, there could have been options, but I believe last year was strictly staff recommendations.
So I think at this point, are we hoping for staff recommendation, or are we going to save them the grief and kind of give them some direction?
Well, I'd like to see some staff recommendations options come back. Like I said, we're also missing 2 counselors. They might have some strong opinions on what
No doubt.
comes,
And I respect
what's yet
that.
to come. So at least if there's some options there right away, I think it'll kind of skip this step, them coming in February.
Okay, but then we're of the understanding of whatever options presented, we're hopefully not going to try and go away from those options ourselves.
Well,
to save staff that work.
I can't guarantee that from other counselors.
No, but yeah, that's true.
I'm just saying that, at least with the options in there,
Okay.
it starts to say, hey, listen, we're going to come at this gets you this percentage, this gives you this percentage, this gives you this percentage, and it alleviates this step in February that we're doing right now.
Okay, and I just wanted to make one quick comment. When you mentioned reducive service there, that's actual, from my understanding, that's actual like service to the public. That's not we're not talking necessarily just the cost portion. That's less service to the community. So I think, again, as far as the public service part goes, that's going to be impactful there. Councillor Jonker?
Yeah, I guess through you, Mr. Chair, to the CEO. I guess the question is that number 1, is that what you're referring to on that 78? No, that's something on top again, right?
That's correct. So
Okay. Yeah.
those are,
Yeah.
I had to tell you a culled list of
Yep.
requests that have come forward, and things that, our job is to let you know what our needs are, and
Yeah. Nope.
and then council makes the decision, but that's over and above.
Okay, okay. And then just,
go ahead.
I do want to put on record that I agree with the mayor on number 2. That's something to me that, you know what, we have reserves for everything. We should be. So this one is setting up an extra one that I think we can, I won't be able to support that one. So if that one can be, that CIP one.
The community improvement plan?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right. So I guess at this point, we're gonna, did you want to make a quick statement? Go right ahead.
Through you, Chairman Riley, I hope you don't mind.
I don't.
But if you look at where we go over what increased the levy, if you look at those points, some of them you cannot change, utilities. Some of them you can ask, or there could be changes in some of them. The service level changes, if you eliminate them or tell us not to do them, it's not going to change that 6.48%. However, if you look at the points that we use to outline what's causing pressure on this budget, some of those items are flexible, don't necessarily have to happen. And that, if you're sending it back to staff, that's the area that I would probably myself
Recommend.
concentrate on.
Okay. And so I think you guys understand that that's likely what's going to come back as far as the focus point? Okay. I guess that being the case, we're going to refer this back to staff, and I guess in February you're going to bring it back to us. So I have a mover and a seconder. We still got to finish the rest of the recommendation here. So I'll read it again. Let me just get my page, and then I got to step back into the thing I missed before. Okay. So at this point, I can't remember who my mover and seconder was, but and so as the mayor moved it, Councilor Ganaan second, that report RFD-T-01-20 regarding the 2020 draft operating and capital budget preliminary report dated January 21st, 2020 be received, and that council approve a 2019 budget amendment authorizing the transfer of $125,000 into the equipment reserve and $40,000 into the fire reserve, which will be funded through the 2019 estimated surplus of $250,000. All those in favor? Okay, that carries. So then, now I believe I need a mover and a seconder to go back to the public portion that I accidentally skipped. Okay, so again, I apologize for skipping the addressing the items on the agenda. So right now we're going to go back to what I should have did about probably an hour ago. So thank you very much for your patience. If there's any members of the gallery that would like to speak to any items on the agenda, this is your time to speak. I guess 1 hour in total shall be allocated for this section of the agenda, and each individual person shall only have about 5 minutes to address their issue. With some exceptions, a response may not be provided, and the matter may be referred to staff. So I will start with Mr. Klaas there. Yep, come right up to the podium there, sir. It should be. Did it?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Is it on?
It is, yeah.
About budget, you hear about every here and there, and that sounds nice, of course. Every taxpayer likes to hear that, including me. But if you start claiming too much, you have to cancel next year, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, and then you have to pay double. So if you claim too much now, it will cost you a lot of money in the future. That's all I have to say. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. But that is quite often the case. If you trim now, you have to pay double later on.
Excellent comment. Thank you, sir. Any other members of the gallery? Excellent. Come on up. So, yes, I probably should have asked that before, and I apologize. So I'll just get you to state your name and address.
Also make sure you're working with the
Yeah, perfect.
Ross Murray, 25 Streamside Drive. I had something prepared for any of the items that we talked about already. Maybe to your surprise, I'm not going to talk about the levy. I don't have a problem with 6.47. I think it's reasonable. 9.92 is kind of high, but I don't have a problem with that as well. I do have two concerns when I'm looking at the budget, and it's what I'm worried about. When I look at this budget, I start worrying about future budgets. I'll explain why. This budget significantly increases operational expenses, and it continues to draw down on reserves. So if you look at the budget, this budget, the operating budget will exceed 2019 spending by 10%. That's $815,000. If you pass the 9.92 increase tonight, you will not cover that expense. So I have a concern with the way expenses are increasing. However, it's also related to the drawdown in reserves, because a lot of that expense is a result of not having reserves. So they're not having all these items are being charged the operating budget. So the reserves do have an impact. We are reducing the reserve this year by over $1 million. that's my concern. So, I have a comment here, but they basically say limited information available to me. But I would welcome having someone explain to me if my concerns are followed. It's basically.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I think we're good there. Now, I will say, given Premier Ford's statement the other day, he did say that there will be no surprises. So I just don't want you to get your hopes up just yet. But he publicly made that statement. So, anyways, anybody else in the gallery that would like to step on up and have your chance at the mic there? I promise I don't bite. No? Okay. We're good. So moving forward, so I guess next item of business is other business. So members committee, verbal updates from members of boards and committees if required. So we're going to start, sorry, I went to the left first instinct, so I'll start with Mayor Bilsma.
So, thank you very much. I just wanted to highlight, we got an email in our inbox, and I'm always a little bit scatterbrained when it comes to these things, but let me see if I can find it on my phone. The coldest night of the year, I registered. I'm going to do it regardless whether you guys join me or not, but I strongly encourage you to, walk with me. We've done it now for several years. I mean, the chili alone is worth it. But I just want to encourage other councillors to consider doing that with their families and friends. So I just wanted to highlight that, and that's February the 20. Oh, let me see here if I can find it quickly. It's the 22nd, February 22nd. And if you don't want to walk, I'm receiving pledges. So by all means, please sponsor me. And so if I don't see any, movement to volunteer over the next 3 days, I'm going to hit you all up. And and then one final thing. Councillor Riley, Madam CAO, myself spent the last day and a half, 2 days, 2 days kind of proper over 3 days, from Sunday till Tuesday for some of us, at Roma in Toronto. Very informative, some really good workshops. Some were informative but not very exciting to listen to, and some very little application, but still Roma should be commended for putting on a good program. And probably the highlight for me is the delegations that were had. So we had 3 key delegations where we were able to advance north-south, our concerns with respect to cannabis operations, and our concerns with respect to site alteration. And so I think that they were well received by the ministers who gave us the time, Minister Ernie Hardeman and Toby Barrett, Carolyn Mulrooney, and Andrea Kanjan. Yeah, so just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Trapetta, do you have anything? Councillor Ganam?
I do, thank you. Further to coldest night of the year, pending. We've walked the last few years too, but no decision at this point in time. I'd just like to point out that as well, when you mentioned the hospital earlier, I do represent the municipality on the Community Advisory Committee for the hospital, and we have a meeting coming up this Thursday, and so hopefully by council next week I might have some pieces of information. I do know that all the reports are coming in on the fundraising efforts over the last year. They're being provided at this meeting, so we may better know where we are. I think the fact that West Lincoln has money in reserve for that is to our credit. There are still, for example, Grimsby has not done that. And so at least we have a start. So we'll find out more at the next meeting. So the other thing I just want to say very briefly is often in this time frame at any meeting, I take an opportunity to thank the volunteers, point out what great West Lincoln volunteers we have in community care when that comes up, point out what great volunteers we have in terms of the gleaners, the Niagara Christian gleaners. I also want to point out today that when the newspapers came on the weekend, that there was a huge big article about the great number of West Lincoln volunteers who head up the 4-H groups. And I think that sometimes, those people are doing very quiet, very wonderful work in our community with our youth, representing all kinds of various groups and that they have, from the rabbit and goat group to cooking and hiking. But they're sort of capitalizing on the interests of the young people in the community and turning that into a group. And those people are stepping up to become leaders. And so I think that they should just be also publicly commended for their good work. So that's all. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Ganane. Councillor Jonker? Okay. I'll just make one quick statement. The mayor kind of covered most of it. I don't know if you mentioned Regional Councillor Albert Witteveen was with us. I think you might have just slipped your mind. There's a bunch of stuff that we had to deal with the last few days. But I thought as well, that was an excellent opportunity for us to advocate for the province and work towards, or for our community with the province, and working towards building up our community, hopefully not having to worry about in the future projects coming out of the tax basin for projects that are going to hopefully require a partnership with the region, the province, and the federal government. So again, that was an excellent opportunity, and I'm glad we were able to take advantage of it, and I hope other councillors in the future are able to join us. That being said, we'll move on to new business. I don't think there is, but is there any items new business? Not seeing. Oh, go right ahead.
Sorry, just ask a new business. I know we referred Councillor Ganane's that vacation thing. I was wondering, does it have to go back to staff? Can I do it under here, or can't we just bring it in May's meeting, come to council or administration? Because then I'll have more of a schedule on what our summer schedule is if it comes to May.
You're asking if we can defer it to May and have a collective
Does it have to?
discussion then?
Well, what I'm saying, I'm just curious. I've never done this before. That's why I'm asking this. So please bear with me, Joanne and Madam CIO. It's the first time I've done this in council. The recommendation that we sent, we said, because you want to go back to staff, and then, going back and forth to emails, no one really knows. Can't that come back to an administration meeting, and we just decide there, closer to the July schedule, or July or August dates? Like if it comes, let's say, April or May, because you said your date you're going, but you're way planned ahead, right? But I might not have a date for my holidays yet. I'm saying if we come in April or May, does it have to go back to staff for Joanne to go back and forth and waste time emailing everybody? Does this date work? Does that date work? Does this not? Or
I think
if it's fine by you guys, we can keep it that way. I was just curious. That's all.
through you, Chair Riley, to Councillor Trumbetta, I think the reason why we're doing it early is so that you can actually plan your vacations around it. So, of course, we're always served at the pleasure of council, so whatever council wishes us to do. But I think we're in a bit of a catch-22. Do we set the dates now, or and right now what will happen is our clerk will be doing just a straw poll through emails to check on the majority dates and bring that back. So
All right,
I'm
that's
sorry,
fine.
I can't be more definitive. I'm sort of waiting for this to get set as well.
If I could provide any direction, I would suggest just let staff
Sure.
work on it, and then the rest of us can either plan around it, and if a situation should come up, then the situation comes up.
You're doing really good as your first role as chair, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate that. Okay, so no new items, so that brings us to confidential matters. Recommendation that the next portion of this meeting be closed to the public to consider the following pursuant to Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. 1, Director of Public Works and Recreation Mike DePaula, legal personal matters relating to an identifiable individual, solicitor, client privilege matter, potential claim, applicable closed sessions exemptions, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local, board employees, advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose. And then the recommendation is, okay, so I guess I need a mover. If I can get Mayor Billisma, seconder, Councillor Ganane. I guess all those in favor? All right, this meeting is confidential for the time being.